Okay. Hello, my name is Laird Anderson, and welcome to Oral History with Laird. Today's sponsor is The Word Shop. Visit thewordshop.com. That is SHOPPE. Use the code Laird10 to save 10% off your order. Okay. Today I'm with my grandma, Cindy Gallaway, to talk about my 11th great grandma, Hannah Duston, aka Hatchet Grandma. Okay, Grandma, who was Hannah Duston and why do we call her Hatchet Grandma?
Hannah Duston was my 9th great grandma, so that makes her your 11th great grandma. Mm-hmm. And she lived in Massachusetts, colony in the 1600s. And we call her Hatchet Grandma because it's kind of an interesting story, one that's kind of controversial, but we think that she did what she had to do to protect herself at the time. And the reason we call her Hatchet Grandma, she was living in a village near the border of what is now New Hampshire. And her village was being attacked by a group of Indians who were being supported by the French people in Canada. And remember, at that time, the French and the English were always disputing each other. And so these Indians were working with on behalf of the French people, and they would go into villages and take people captive with the idea that they would go back to Quebec. And Grandma Hannah had just given birth to, I think, about her 8th child, just a few days before that, and she wasn't doing real well, so they had a nurse-type lady living there with them. And they knew these Indians were coming to the village, and so she told her husband and the other children just to run and be safe. She knew she could not. So Grandma Hannah, and the nurse lady, whose name was Mary, took off with they were taken away by the Indians with the infant baby. And along the way, the baby was fussing like babies do, and the Indians took the baby and slammed it against an apple tree, and the baby died. And so at that point, obviously, that would make a person pretty upset. So the ladies were then taken to this encampment, which was in what is now present-day New Hampshire, quite a long distance on the Merrimack River. And at this encampment, there were just 2 or 3 Indian families there. That's what they were doing. They would take people into small groups and then eventually take them on to Quebec. And Grandma and this woman met this young boy who was 14 or 15. He had been taken captive several months prior to that. And so he had kind of learned the ways of these people. And he... the ladies said, we can escape if you fill us in on how everything works around this camp. The 3 of us can escape and get back to our village. And so he knew where their weapons were, and he knew their sleeping habits. So one night, Grandma and Mary and this young boy took the hatchets, and they went into the tents or whatever they were sleeping in, and they killed quite a few people.
I think it was 8 or 9.
8 or 9 people.
I think it was.
There were some, a couple of the women and some of the kids. A couple of the kids were not killed. This is what makes her pretty controversial, because that's not a nice thing to think that somebody that killed people. Yeah. However, they had killed her baby, and so thinking of the times. And the idea that if she could get back to her village, she would see her other children. And if they didn't escape, they never would. They'd end up in Quebec. And so they destroyed all the canoes except one. And they got in the canoe and they went down the Merrimack River back to its present-day town is called Haverhill, Massachusetts. And they got back and found out that her husband and her children had escaped and they were fine. And so that's why we call her Hatchet Grandma.
Yeah. Yeah, that's...
It's quite a story, isn't it?
Yeah, I never knew about... I always thought the baby, they like... I didn't know they slammed it against the apple
Yeah,
tree.
it's documented. There's a book that I read a couple years ago called Massacre on the Merrimack. And quite a bit of the book is about Hannah and also other stories of the time. But there's been lots of research on her, and there are history books written about her. So this, we know it's true.
Yeah. Yeah, so, yeah. Next question. What is your favorite story about her?
Well, my favorite story, I guess it would be, this whole thing is, what she's about. But I think what I what I like to think of is that she was a really strong-willed woman, and I think some of that trait has been passed down through the generations. Hannah was. She's descended through my father's mother's side. So my grandmother, Marion Drury was her maiden name, and Hannah is descended through her. Well, my grandmother was quite a strong-willed woman. She started her own real estate business in the 1940s when most women did not work outside of their home. And most women certainly didn't hold positions of much importance in companies and things like that. So I like to think that some of Hannah's determination got passed down through the generations.
So, yeah, that's pretty interesting. So, okay. You just went on a trip with your sisters. What inspired that trip?
Well, my sisters and I like to do a trip every year together, and there are 2 statues that have been erected to honor our 9th great-grandmother, Hannah Duston. One of them is in the town of Haverhill, Massachusetts, and the other one is at the site of where they were taken along the Merrimack River in New Hampshire, which is by car about an hour north of Massachusetts. So to walk that far would have taken a long time, because it took us last summer about an hour on an expressway to drive that far. So that's the main reason we went, was to see those statues that had been erected. And we did some exploring in some of the old cemeteries to find the gravestones of some of the people who are also descendants of Hannah.
So also artists.
And also yes. So someday maybe you should come with us
that'd be
to
fun.
Haverhill, Massachusetts, and look at the statue.
Yeah, that'd be really fun, actually. Okay. If this happened today, do you think she would still be famous?
Well, she might be famous in a different way if this happened today. Because remember, at the time, the settlers thought they had use of the land, and they were driving people off their land, which would be, that's not necessarily a nice thing that they did. However, they were just living their life, and they were being attacked. Kind of a different situation, because these Indians were in connection with the French, who were warring with the British all the time. So she probably would be famous, but there'd probably be an awful lot of people who would not think very highly of what she did.
Like famous in a bad way.
Right.
So, and why is this story important to our family?
Well, I think everybody likes family history.
Yeah. And
I was a history teacher for a lot of years. I taught middle school history and other social studies things. But I think family history is really important, because then you know where your family lived, and you know about the things that were important to your family. And obviously, Hannah's most important thing to her was her own family, to be able to survive an attack like that and to be able to get back to her family and raise her children. That was obviously really, really important to her. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's just fun to know your family history.
Yeah. And I think it's kind of like cool to know that like you're descended by those people.
Yeah. It's pretty cool when you see the lineup and some of the names repeat. Like I think Hannah actually had a daughter named Hannah, which was kind of common at the time. And to then look through the cemeteries and see the connection with all these different people, because my sister had done a lot of research before we went there, so we knew what cemeteries to go to. And one of the cemeteries in Haverhill, we had to get somebody who worked at the cemetery to unlock a gate into the really old part of the cemetery, because it was some of those gravestones go back to when Massachusetts was first a colony. And so they have them so that they're real protected. So we found a worker, and he unlocked the door or the gate for us, and we were wandering around in that cemetery for a better part of an afternoon, taking pictures of gravestones and finding some of our old long-lost relatives.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. Thank you for joining Oral History with Laird. On our next episode, we will be talking to my grandpa about a Civil War amputation kit. Thank you.